Imagine this: the person you confide in, laugh with and trust with your deepest secrets is secretly plotting your demise. Not a stranger, not an enemy, but someone you'd never suspect. What would you do if the danger wasn't lurking in the shadows, but sitting right beside you? Welcome to Crime Chronicles, where we peel back the facade of ordinary lives to expose chilling tales of betrayal, deceit, and dark secrets hidden in plain sight. These aren't just stories, they're real accounts of trust twisted into treachery, of lives shattered by the very people meant to protect them. If you're fascinated by the terrifying truths that hide behind perfect smiles and picture-perfect lives, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell.
What would you do if the person you trusted the most was hiding the darkest secret of all? Picture this: the person you look up to, the one who stands at the pulpit every Sunday preaching about love, faith, and family values, is living a double life. A life filled with lies, betrayal, and an unthinkable crime. Imagine discovering that the very person who tucked you into bed at night, prayed over your life, and guided your moral compass is capable of the most horrifying act: murder. In the quiet, seemingly peaceful town of Cedar Grove, Texas, no one could have predicted the storm that was looming behind closed doors. A beloved pastor, a pillar of the community, someone who was supposed to be a beacon of hope and righteousness, harbored a secret so vile it would send shockwaves through the town and beyond. This isn't just a story about a crime, it's a story about the masks people wear, the facades they build, and the terrifying lengths they'll go to keep their darkest truths hidden. Today, we're diving deep into a case that will make you question everything you thought you knew about trust, loyalty, and the human heart. A case that proves sometimes the most dangerous monsters aren't hiding under your bed, they're sitting right across the dinner table. How does a father, sworn to protect and love his child, become her executioner? What drives a man of faith to commit a sin so unforgivable it tears apart the very fabric of his family and community? This is the chilling tale of Pastor David Thompson, a man who wore the mask of righteousness while hiding a soul consumed by darkness. As we unravel this twisted narrative, you'll hear about the bright, beautiful life of Emily Thompson, an 18-year-old girl with dreams bigger than her small town. You'll learn about the betrayal of friendship, the horrifying discovery that shattered her world, and the desperate cover-up that led to her tragic end. Every detail will pull you deeper into a web of deceit, manipulation, and cold-blooded murder. So, brace yourself. This isn't just another crime story. It's a journey into the heart of darkness, hidden beneath the surface of an ordinary town, inside an ordinary home, behind the smile of an ordinary man who turned out to be anything but ordinary. Stay with us as we uncover the chilling story of betrayal, lies, and murder that shocked an entire town. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Crime Chronicles for more real-life crime stories that will leave you speechless. Your support helps us bring these stories to light, ensuring that the victims are never forgotten and the lessons learned never fade away. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and prepare to be captivated by the truth that hides in the shadows. It was a quiet summer morning in Cedar Grove, Texas. The kind of morning where the sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden rays that stretched lazily over the sleepy streets of the small town. Cedar Grove was the sort of place where everyone knew everyone, and the humdrum of everyday life ran like clockwork. People smiled, waved, and chatted as they went about their business, and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. But Cedar Grove had its dark corners, the kind of places where secrets festered like wounds that never quite healed. It was in those shadows that the worst things could happen quietly, unnoticed, until the day they erupted into the open with a force that would shatter everything. 18-year-old Emily Thompson was the kind of girl who made the sun shine brighter. With her long, chestnut hair and wide, doe-like eyes, she was the picture of innocence and promise. She was the sort of person who lit up any room she entered, someone who had a natural charisma that drew people to her. She had dreams, big dreams. Emily wanted to go to college to study journalism and become a voice for the voiceless. She wanted to tell stories that mattered, stories that would inspire change. But those dreams were slipping away, just out of reach, like sand through an open hand. Her best friend, Sarah Miller, was her rock. The two had been inseparable since they were children, sharing secrets, fears, and laughter as they navigated life together. Where Emily went, Sarah was sure to follow. They had a bond that seemed unbreakable, a friendship that felt like it had always been and always would be. But that bond, like so many others in Cedar Grove, was about to be tested. Emily's father, Pastor David Thompson, was a well-respected man in their community. He was the kind of person people turned to for guidance, for solace, for faith. As the pastor of Cedar Grove's First Baptist Church, David Thompson had built a reputation as a man of integrity, a pillar of the community. He preached about love, about family values, and the importance of following the Lord's path. His voice was strong and comforting, capable of calming even the most troubled souls. And every Sunday, his congregation would gather in the small church to hear his words of wisdom and grace. But behind the warm smile, the kind eyes, and the gentle way he spoke, David Thompson was hiding something, a secret so dark, so dire, it would tear apart everything he had worked to build. It started with little things. A fleeting look when he thought no one was watching. A hushed conversation in the corner of the church office. Emily had always been observant, attuned to the small details that others overlooked. She noticed how her father would grow tense whenever certain names were mentioned. How he seemed to withdraw from certain members of the congregation, his demeanor becoming distant and cold. But Emily had always chalked it up to stress. Being a pastor was a heavy burden, and she knew her father carried it with the weight of the world on his shoulders. It wasn't until one summer evening just a week before everything changed that Emily began to sense something was wrong. The night was warm, the air thick with the scent of blooming honeysuckle, and the chirping of crickets filled the silence as Emily walked back from the church after a late-night Bible study session. She had stayed behind to help her father organize some paperwork for the upcoming church event. As she walked home along the dirt road that led from the church to their house, she saw her father's car parked in the driveway. But what she didn't expect was the figure standing beside it. It was a man. Tall, with a dark coat draped over his shoulders despite the heat. Emily didn't recognize him, and that alone raised the hairs on the back of her neck. He stood too still, too quiet. As if he was waiting for something. Emily slowed her pace, instincts kicking in. She felt a sudden unease crawl up her spine. She had learned long ago that in Cedar Grove, when something felt wrong, it usually was. She ducked behind the tall oak tree near the fence and peered through the thick leaves, straining to get a better look. Her father and the man were deep in conversation, their voices low and urgent. Emily couldn't hear the words, but the body language told a different story. Her father's posture was stiff, defensive even, and the stranger seemed to be pushing him for something. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she watched them for several minutes, her mind racing with questions. What was going on? Why hadn't she seen this man before? The conversation grew more heated. Her father took a step back, his hands clenched at his sides, and for the first time, Emily saw a crack in his calm demeanor. He was afraid. It was in the way his jaw tightened, the way his shoulders hunched as if he were trying to make himself smaller. Emily's blood ran cold. Then, without warning, the stranger turned and walked away, disappearing into the night like a shadow. Her father watched him go, his face grim, his eyes distant. He didn't even notice Emily lurking just a few feet away. The next few days passed in a blur for Emily. She tried to push the encounter from her mind, but it gnawed at her. The look in her father's eyes, the fear, she couldn't shake it. That Friday, Emily went to Sarah's house. They sat in the backyard, a glass of lemonade between them, talking about nothing and everything, as best friends often do. But Emily couldn't keep the worry out of her voice. Sarah, she began, her voice quiet, I think something's wrong with my dad. He's different lately. I don't know how to explain it, but I've been seeing things that don't add up. Sarah frowned, leaning forward in concern. What do you mean, Em? Emily hesitated for a moment, and then decided to tell her everything: the mysterious man, the strange conversation, and the fear she had seen in her father's eyes. "You have to be imagining it," Sarah said gently, though Emily could see the worry in her friend's eyes. "Your dad is the pastor, Em. Everyone looks up to him." "I know, but..." Emily stopped herself, biting her lip. I don't know. I have this feeling like something is coming, something bad. I can't explain it." The next morning, Emily found herself unable to focus. She tried to get ready for her day, but her mind kept drifting back to the conversation she'd overheard. She found herself standing in the hallway, staring at the door to her father's study. Something urged her to go in, to look through the papers on his desk, to find some clue, some piece of evidence that would explain what she had seen. But as she reached for the doorknob, she heard her father's footsteps approaching. Emily froze, her heart racing. She quickly stepped back and pretended to be looking for something in the kitchen. Her father appeared in the doorway, smiling as he always did. But his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything okay, Emily?" he asked, his voice too calm. Emily nodded, forcing a smile of her own. "Yeah, Dad. Just thinking about school, you know." Her father seemed satisfied with that, and for a moment, Emily felt a pang of guilt. She loved him. He was her father, and she knew he would never do anything to intentionally hurt anyone. But there was something in the way he held himself, in the way he hid behind his position as a pastor, that made her wonder just how much of the truth he was keeping from her. But Emily was about to find out, whether she was ready or not. David had been having an affair. Not just with anyone, but with Sarah, his daughter's best friend. It started innocently enough: late-night Bible study sessions, private talks about faith and life. But soon, those talks turned into something else. Something forbidden. Sarah, young and impressionable, believed David when he told her it was love. He promised her things he could never give, weaving lies as skillfully as he preached sermons. But secrets like that can't stay hidden forever. Emily started noticing things. Her dad's late nights, the strange looks between him and Sarah, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered the room. At first, she thought she was imagining it. But the truth has a way of revealing itself. The night air was cool against Emily's skin as she left her friend's party earlier than planned. The laughter and music still echoed faintly in her mind, but her heart felt heavy for reasons she couldn't explain. Maybe it was just exhaustion, or maybe it was the uneasy feeling that had been creeping up on her lately. She dismissed it as she walked the quiet streets of Cedar Grove, the faint glow of porch lights guiding her way home. When she arrived, the house was dark except for a sliver of light sneaking out from under her father's study door. It was odd, because her father usually retired early on Fridays after a long day preparing for Sunday's sermon. She dropped her bag quietly by the door and called out, "Dad? I'm home." No response. Emily frowned. The silence felt unnatural, thick like a heavy blanket draped over the house. She climbed the stairs slowly, her footsteps muffled against the worn carpet. As she reached the top, she heard it, voices, low, hushed voices, almost like whispers, seeping through the crack of the slightly ajar study door. Curiosity tugged at her. She approached, her heart beginning to race without reason. Maybe it was just her dad on a call, she told herself. But something felt off. She pushed the door open gently, not prepared for what she was about to see. Her world shattered in an instant. There they were, her father, Pastor David Thompson, and Sarah Miller, her best friend since kindergarten, entwined in an embrace that no father should ever have with his daughter's best friend. Their faces snapped towards the door, both frozen in shock. Sarah's eyes widened, her face flushing with guilt, while David quickly stepped back, his expression morphing from surprise to something unreadable. Emily's breath hitched in her throat. For a second, the world stood still, the silence louder than any scream. Then came the explosion. What the hell is going on? Emily's voice ripped through the house, raw and filled with rage. Her chest heaved as she pointed an accusing finger, her mind struggling to process the betrayal. How could you? Both of you? David stepped forward, hands raised as if to calm a wild animal. Emily, listen to me, it's not what you think. Not what I think, she spat, her voice trembling with fury. I see it with my own eyes, Dad. Sarah tried to speak, tears brimming in her eyes. Emily, please. I didn't mean for this to happen. But Emily was beyond reasoning. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. The girl she had trusted with her deepest secrets, the father she had admired and loved, both had shattered her heart into pieces too small to mend. You're disgusting, Emily hissed, her voice low and venomous. Both of you. David's face crumbled, guilt washing over his features. Emily, please, you have to understand. Understand what? That my best friend is sleeping with my father. That the man who preaches about family values is a liar and a hypocrite. She laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and broken. I'm done. I'm telling Mom. I'm telling the church. I'm telling everyone. Panic flashed across David's face. He reached out, but Emily recoiled as if his touch could burn her. She backed away, her mind racing. Her world had shifted off its axis, and she couldn't find her footing. She stormed out of the study, slamming the door behind her, her heart pounding like a war drum. She could hear David calling after her, but his words were just noise now. She ran to her room, locking the door, sliding down to the floor as sobs racked her body. Her chest ached, not from the betrayal alone but from the crushing weight of her broken reality. The man she thought was a pillar of strength and morality was nothing but a fraud. And Sarah, her sister in all but blood, was now the face of ultimate betrayal. But Emily wasn't the type to stay broken. No. Fury gave her strength. She wiped her tears, stood up, and stared at herself in the mirror. Her face was a mask of grief and rage, but beneath that was something stronger, resolve. She would not be silenced. What would you do if you uncovered a secret so dark it could ruin your family? Would you confront it head-on or bury it deep, hoping it fades away? Hold that thought. If you're gripped by Emily's story and dying to know what happens next, hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. The truth is far from over, and the secrets in Cedar Grove are just beginning to unravel. You won't want to miss what comes next. David Thompson sat alone in his dusky study, the weight of his actions pressing down like a vice. His perfect life, the one he had crafted so carefully with sermons, smiles, and Sunday mornings, was unraveling. Emily's words echoed in his mind, sharp as blades, I'm telling Mom. I'm telling the church. I'm telling everyone. Panic gripped him. What would happen if the truth came out? The shame, the disgrace, everything he had built would crumble. He couldn't let that happen. Not after all the sacrifices he'd made to protect his image. He went to Emily's room that night, his heart pounding like a drum. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint creak of the wooden floor beneath his feet. His hand trembled as he turned the doorknob, pushing the door open with agonizing slowness. Emily laid there, her face peaceful, unaware of the darkness looming over her. David stood in the doorway, tears already streaming down his face. This was his daughter, the little girl he had once rocked to sleep, the one who used to sit on his lap during bedtime stories. But fear had twisted his love into something unrecognizable. He crept closer, his breath shallow, his mind screaming to stop. But his hands moved on their own, driven by panic and desperation. With trembling fingers, he pressed a pillow over Emily's face. Her body jolted awake, eyes wide with terror as she struggled beneath his weight. She fought, clawed at his hands, her muffled cries piercing through the room. David sobbed uncontrollably, whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," over and over. But he didn't stop. Not until her movements grew weaker, and then still. When it was over, he collapsed beside her, clutching her lifeless body, his grief and guilt consuming him. The reality of what he had done hit him like a tidal wave. He had crossed a line there was no coming back from. The next morning, David composed himself. He rehearsed the role he needed to play. Picking up the phone with shaky hands, he dialed 911, his voice breaking as he sobbed into the receiver. "My daughter, she's not breathing, please, send help." When the paramedics arrived, they found David cradling Emily, tears streaming down his face. He played the part of the grieving father flawlessly, his cries filled with anguish. The town mourned with him, offering condolences, prayers, and casseroles. They saw a broken man, a father shattered by loss. But beneath the mask of sorrow was a monster, a man who had traded his daughter's life to protect his own secrets. Imagine uncovering a truth so horrifying it shatters everything you thought you knew about someone. Now, imagine the person hiding that truth would do anything to keep it buried. Are you gripped by Emily's tragic story? Do you feel the chilling suspense creeping in? Then don't stop now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because the story isn't over. Darker secrets are still buried, and the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface. Stay with us to uncover what happens next. Sarah, if there's something you're not telling me, now is the time. Emily deserves the truth. Those words broke something inside Sarah. Tears streamed down her face as she crumbled under the weight of her guilt. Between sobs, she confessed everything: the affair with David, Emily's discovery of their secret, the threats David had made to keep her silent, and ultimately, the night of the murder. "He said she would ruin everything," Sarah cried. "He said it was the only way to protect us." With Sarah's confession, the case took a dark turn. Detective Bennett obtained a warrant to search the Thompson home. In David's study, they found journals filled with disturbing entries, detailing his obsession with control, his fear of exposure, and his twisted justification for what he had done. They also discovered inconsistencies in the timeline he provided, phone records, security footage from nearby houses, and forensic evidence that contradicted his version of events. David was arrested at the church, mid-sermon, as a stunned congregation watched in disbelief. The beloved pastor, once a symbol of morality and guidance, was led away in handcuffs. His face, once the picture of piety, was now plastered across the news as that of a cold-blooded killer. The trial was a media sensation. The courtroom was packed with reporters, townspeople, and grieving friends. David sat stone-faced, showing no remorse, only regret that his secret had been exposed. His defense team tried to paint him as a man who had made mistakes, a victim of circumstance, but the evidence was overwhelming. Sarah testified against him, her voice trembling as she recounted the events leading up to Emily's death. Her testimony was heartbreaking, filled with guilt and remorse. She admitted her role in the affair but made it clear she had no part in the murder. The prosecution presented a chilling narrative of a man willing to do anything to protect his image, even if it meant silencing his own daughter. They showed the jury the evidence, the journals, the phone records, the forensic reports. The truth was undeniable. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning with a verdict: guilty on all counts. David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, he remained emotionless, staring straight ahead. The mask had finally slipped, revealing the monster beneath. Cedar Grove would never be the same. The town that had once idolized Pastor David Thompson was left to grapple with the horrifying reality of who he truly was. But amidst the darkness, there was a sense of justice. Emily's voice had been silenced, but her story had been heard. Imagine living in a town where the person you trusted most turned out to be hiding the darkest secret of all. How far would someone go to protect their image? And what happens when the truth refuses to stay buried? betrayal, lies, murder. All hidden behind the mask of faith. If stories like this captivate you, make sure to subscribe to Crime Chronicles. Hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for more real-life tales that will haunt your thoughts long after the video ends.